Am I live? Don't know. Sabrina says I'm live. Hi, my name's Regina, and this is my first Facebook Live presentation, so I hope everybody is patient with me. We've been doing these for a little while, and Sabrina and Michelle and Monica and Stephen and Missy have done some awesome presentations, and so I hope you guys go back and check those out as well. And we're going to ask that if in the comments, if you could maybe just put in a comment of where you're from, how old you are, if you're, we want to know if we've got some kids on here, because we're trying to really gear this toward a younger audience to help teach them about these amazing, amazing whales that we have on our planet. And today I'm going to talk about one of my very favorite whales, and those are North Atlantic right whales. So I'm going to start now because I can't tell if we're live. So I'm going to trust that we are because I can't see it. So we're going to talk about North Atlantic right whales, and I titled this talk, "The Magical Giants Who Won't Take Your Breath Away." Quite the opposite, in fact. And it is quite the opposite, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is and why these right whales are so magical. So one of the things I think that makes them magical is they're huge, they're enormous whales. And it's hard to really kind of understand how big they are. But as adults, this mom, she can be 52 feet long and weigh 70 tons. And that's sort of hard to understand how big that really is. So I tried to give you some perspective here. That's about a bus and a half long. But that doesn't even compare to the number of buses for her weight. 70 tons is about 5 school buses. So these creatures are massive in their magic. And really, really big whales, that means that they have really, really big babies. And so this little newborn nugget here is not anything to sneeze at in itself. At birth, they're about 13 to 18 feet long. And so to try and give you some perspective with that, that's about the size of a typical car. So the next time you get in the car, think about the fact that that's about the size of a baby right whale. So they certainly have size in their magic. What else makes them magical? Well, I think it's pretty cool that right whales are born with their very own crown. Now, the crown doesn't come out for a little while, because if you're a mom right whale, it probably would hurt to give birth to a baby with a crown. But they do have crowns that they come with, and as adults, they have these amazing, amazing crowns that are on their heads and their chins, and their proper name is callosities. So right whales have these cool callosity crowns that are all in the places kind of like where we have hair, like eyebrows and chin hair and maybe a mustache. But they have these white raised areas that are called callosities. And so that's what I'm calling their crown. And I think that that's pretty cool. Now they look white in the picture, and they look white. You can see one of the callosities here, but they're not actually white. And I think that that's something else that's pretty magical about them, is that each of these callosities is home to its own kingdom of tiny little creatures called cyanids. And these tiny little crustaceans live on the callosities, and they're the ones that make it look white in color. Now, cyanids have a very important job as well, and they travel with right whales for their entire life. And they're like little vacuum cleaners, and they feed on algae and they feed on slough skin. And so they help to keep their magic right whale clean as they're swimming around with them on the ocean. Something else that's really cool is that right whales are pretty magic with their baleen. Sabrina did an earlier talk about baleen you can go look at, which is cool, from different kinds of whales and what baleen, how it's different in different whales. Right whales have baleen that can be up to 10 feet long. So it's massive, massive baleen. And it hangs down from the upper jaw. And baleen is made out of the same protein called keratin that your hair and your fingernail is made from. So that means if you're a magical North Atlantic right whale, you have about 400 hairy fingernails growing out of your upper jaw. And that sounds kind of gross. So do you think that they use them like fingernails? They scratch with them? Do they go to the salon? No. If you saw Sabrina talk, then you already know that baleen is not like a fingernail. It's actually more like a strainer. It's like a colander. And so baleen has this really, really important role. And what it does is it helps them catch food, because right whales are mammals just like we are. And that means that they can't drink salt water any more than we can. And so they use the baleen to strain the water out and keep the food in their mouths. And so a magical whale, of course, has to have magical food to eat. And right whales have very, very specific kinds of foods. They're very picky eaters, in fact. And what they like to eat are called copepods. And copepods are tiny little zooplankton. And when I say tiny, I mean tiny. They're about the size of a grain of rice. And that's the favorite kind of food for right whales. It's a cold water kind of food where they go looking for it. And they eat millions and millions of them every day. But probably the thing that I think makes North Atlantic right whales the most magical is actually, and if Stephen were here, I would make him do a drum roll for me. But what makes them most magical to me is their poop. And in our office, we love to talk about whale poop because it really is magical. So why is right whale poop magical? It's magical because of these tiny little things. And these are called phytoplankton. You may never ever see them in your whole life, but they're really important for your own survival. And phytoplankton are like tiny little plants that live near the surface of the ocean. And just like plants on land, phytoplankton do something really, really important. They go through a chemical reaction called photosynthesis. And it uses the sun's energy and carbon dioxide and nutrients to produce food for themselves and to give off oxygen. So we know where the sun comes from. It's in the sky. The carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, so we know where they're getting that. But the big question is, where do they get those nutrients? Because plants on land, they have roots that can go into the soil and they can get their nutrients from roots in the soil. But these phytoplankton have to live near the ocean surface because they have to be near the sunlight. And so Dr. Joe Roman and his colleagues did a lot of research on this, and they actually looked into it, and they found out that one of the most important places that phytoplankton get their nutrients from is from whale poop. So just like you might take vitamins to help to supplement your diet, you need nutrients too. Phytoplankton need nutrients, but they need it brought to them because they don't have those roots. And whales can't poop under pressure. So their bathroom breaks happen at the ocean surface. And that's where they fertilize phytoplankton. And so that's where they give them those important nutrients in that chemical reaction. So why does this matter to you? Do you like to breathe? Because I think it's really important for all of us. And phytoplankton produce about at least half of the oxygen on the planet. So every other breath you take, phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are also the very base of the marine food web. And so tiny little animals called zooplankton eat the phytoplankton, and little fish eat the zooplankton, and bigger fish eat the little fish. And so fish are all dependent on zooplankton. We need fish also. It's an important part of our diet in many countries around the world. So it's important for fish. It's important for breathing. And phytoplankton have this really, really important, fulfilling 1 to 2 day lifespan. And when they take that carbon out of the atmosphere, they bring it to the ocean bottom with them when they die. And that takes carbon out of the environment, and that helps to monitor climate change. And so they're helping to regulate literally the climate of the planet. So phytoplankton are incredibly, incredibly important for our survival. We need phytoplankton to survive. And guess what? Phytoplankton need whale poop to survive. So that's why North Atlantic right whale poop is so incredibly magical to me. Unfortunately, right whales were in fact the right whale to hunt. And so they were an important food source for a long time. They were an important source of oil. Their baleen was used as a precursor for plastic, and they were easy to hunt. They were close to the shore. They floated when they were dead. They had lots of oil in them. And so lots and lots of right whales were hunted until about 1935, when there were so few left that there was a moratorium placed on commercially hunting North Atlantic right whales. You couldn't do it anymore, but there were so few left at that point. So the idea was to try and help to save them by stop hunting them. But unfortunately, we do other things on the planet that are still now impacting them. We're not hunting them anymore, but we have some other issues. And so North Atlantic right whales are now considered to be an endangered species. So do you know what endangered means? It means that there's not a whole lot of them left. So right now, there's only about 400 North Atlantic right whales left in the entire world. And the place that they mostly live is off the east coast of the United States and Atlantic Canada. That's pretty much their home range. And in that home range, that's an important place for us as humans too. We need it and we use it for lots of different things. And one of the things that we use it for is shipping. And shipping is very important to us. The computer that I'm doing this presentation probably came over on a ship. My clothes might have come over on a ship. There might be food in my house that came over on a ship. About 90% of global trade happens over ships. It's important. That's how we get a lot of our stuff. Unfortunately, ships sometimes by accident, and they don't see the whales, they hit them and they can run them over. And that's really bad, obviously. So ship strikes are a big problem still for North Atlantic right whales. When we share their home for the things that we need, we have to figure out how to be careful and not hurt them. Fishing is another thing. Fishing is incredibly, incredibly important all over the world. It's a primary source of protein in many, many countries. It's a really big part of the economy. It's a very big part of the economy in Massachusetts, where I'm from. It's really important, and a lot of people rely on it. And unfortunately, sometimes right whales by accident will swim into fishing gear and they panic and they roll up and they get caught, and it can hurt them. And sometimes it can even kill them. And so that's another problem we have to try and figure out how to solve. And also, as the climate's changing and the ocean is getting warmer, right whales have to go to new places to try and find that food. Remember that copepod really likes cold water. So now right whales are going into places that are new and further north, where there's more ships and fishing gear that they hadn't encountered before. And so climate change is also another issue that right whales are having to face right now. So we have to figure out how to solve these problems, because we already said that phytoplankton is really important to us, that phytoplankton needs right whales. So we need to have right whales. So how do we help to fix these problems and find a way to save right whales and make sure that we still get the things that we need, and that fishermen can still fish, and that we're working together? Because there is hope. And I think that that's something really important, is that there really is hope. This year, there were 10 new North Atlantic right whale babies born. And that's the most that has been born in the past 3 years or 4 years. I can't remember right now, but it's the most we've had in a while. And that's just such a hopeful sign. So we need to work together to figure out how to make sure that those babies can grow up and they can be safe, so that they can have more babies and we can have more right whales. And if we have more right whales, we have more right whale poop, we have more phytoplankton, and we have a healthier planet. So it's really, really important that we try and figure out these things and work together to solve them. So we know that shipping is an issue, but it's not like we can put whale crossing signs in the middle of the ocean and have ships slow down just because we put a sign up there. So we had to figure out how to solve that problem. And a lot of people worked together for a very, very long time to figure out in the US how to do that. And so there were conservation groups, there were researchers, there were managers, there were even shipping companies that tried to find a solution. And the solution was to have very specific areas at certain times of the year, to have ships slow down in those places. So it's called a 10-knot ship strike speed rule. And that's a little over 10 miles an hour. So in those yellow kind of hashtag line areas, the ships have to slow down when right whales are there. And just because those speed reductions went in place, the risk of a right whale getting hit dropped by about 80 to 90%, which is amazing. And so not only did it help maybe to make sure that if a right whale got hit, that it wasn't going to be really bad and it wouldn't kill it, but actually might be able to give right whales more time to get out of the way. And so that was an important solution where a lot of people worked for a very long time together to make this happen. And something similar right now is happening with entanglement issues, trying to find a solution. There's lots and lots of people working right now together to try and figure this out. So probably the biggest threat is the line that goes from the fishing gear on the bottom up to the surface. It's called the buoy line. And right whales sometimes bump into it and they panic, and then they roll up and they get entangled. And I want to be super, super clear that no fisherman in the whole world wants to entangle a right whale. Not only do they not want to hurt right whales, but the right whale swims away with their gear and then they lose money and they lose the gear. So it's not a good fit for anybody. So they're not doing this on purpose. It's just a really terrible accident. But how do we fix it? And so there's lots and lots of people working on it. There's researchers, there's conservation groups, there's fishermen, there's managers that are all working together now to try and figure out a solution. And one thing that's being tested right now, and it's an experiment, it's certainly not something that's ready to be used tomorrow, but it's something that's being experimented on, is called ropeless fishing gear. And what that means is you can see in this picture that line that goes up to the surface isn't there right now. And just like your phone has apps on it, there'd be an app on someone's phone, a fisherman's phone, and they could trigger that buoy line to come to the surface when they needed to pull the gear up onto their boat. And that's the only time that line would be there. And so then when they're done fishing, they can put the line back on the bottom, and then the whale can swim around and it won't have that line to bump into. And so there's people that are trying to test that now to see if it can work in real fisheries, to be able to have fishermen be able to continue to fish and right whales be able to swim in the same places. And so it's a whole lot of people, again, working together to try and find a solution. So what can you do? There's so many things you can do. There's lots and lots of things you can do. And you can help to be part of the solution. And one thing that you can do is on our website, we have a pledge that says, raise your right hand to take the right whale pledge. And if you take that pledge, you're one of the first people that's going to get an email from us and say, hey, right whales need some help. This is what you can do. And so you'll be notified right away when there's an action to take. And so that's one thing you can do, is just stay informed, and you can take our pledge. You can send an email to save a species. And that sounds really weird that an email is going to help, but it can, because there's something in Congress right now called the Save Right Whales Act. And it would give 10 years of funding to have that research and those conservation measures for things like ship strikes and fishing to be able to do the work that needs to be done to figure out those solutions. And it would be 10 years of funding toward that. And if you just email your senator and you go to our website, it'll find out exactly who your senator is. You can send them an email and say, hey, I think this is really important. I'm going to support this act. And they care about hearing from their constituents. So that's another really simple thing that you can do. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but it could have a really big impact. And then there's the things that we can all do every day, and nobody can do everything. And it's just those little things that add up that can make a huge difference. And so you do what you can do. But some really simple things to do are just to think about having a reusable water bottle or reusable coffee cup, and have that instead of having disposable things. It's hard right now with everybody at home, but people still want to celebrate their graduations and happy graduation to all the 2020 graduates. They still want to celebrate weddings and different activities. And a lot of times people will let balloons go to do that. But something you could do is just have bubbles instead. So instead of taking a video of you letting a balloon go to celebrate your friend's graduation, maybe have some bubbles go instead, because balloons often end up in the ocean, and sea turtles and dolphins and even whales can eat them by mistake, but they can't digest them. And so they kind of really resemble jellyfish. And so they do get eaten by mistake. So use balloons and bubbles instead of balloons, and that can be a big help. Turn your lights off when you leave a room. And that sounds kind of simple, but we're all home right now and we're all using lots of more electricity in our houses, and it's easy to leave the room and just say, oh, I'm coming back, not a big deal. But that uses a lot of energy, and that puts carbon in the atmosphere. Everyone's playing games now. I know my kids are playing a lot of games. And so that means that there's a lot of charging going on. But if you unplug your charger when you're not using it, that actually can save energy too. So instead of leaving the charger plugged in, just unplug it when you're not using it. Those little things add up. Recycle the stuff in your house. If you have a plastic water bottle or something that can be recycled, make sure if you have a place to do that, try and recycle it. And if you're going through the drive-through and you're getting your coffee, maybe your iced coffee, maybe just tell them that you don't want the straw, or bring a reusable one with you. And again, there's simple little things that you can do to add up. And we all have tons of food in our house now because we're staying home. So instead of wrapping up the leftovers in plastic wrap, maybe try and see if you can find beeswax wrap instead. And so they're little things, but they do add up, and they're things that we can all do individually at home. And we have some resources on our website. You can go to our website and take our plastic pact, or you can go through some of our educational materials, and maybe you guys have other ideas you can put in the message board, and we can try and share some of those too. It would really help, because I think the biggest message is these whales are amazing and they're magical, and we need them. So we all have to work together to find out what we can do to help to save this endangered right whale. And I want to take a few minutes here to also thank a whole lot of people. I especially want to send a shout out to the Sheehan Family Companies and the Jessica Ricos Foundation, Nantucket Whaler, and Cisco Breweries, and all of our sponsors and supporters who are helping to make this happen so that we can do these educational programs and we can keep doing our work through a really tough time. And we really do appreciate it. And I also want to say a huge thank you to all of the amazing people who work to protect right whales. And there's so many of them. There's so many amazing researchers that I'm really honored to know and to work with. There's in conservation groups and people and managers and fishermen and different people in the boating community. And there's a whole lot of people who work really, really hard. In fact, there's more people working to save right whales than there are right whales. And that's my dream. My dream is someday to get to a point where we have more right whales than people working to save them. But for now, we need your help. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this talk. And I don't know if I can find the messages, but I will try. And if I can, I'll see if I can answer any questions. If not, I'll go through the messages afterwards. So let me see. If I look here. Does damaged baleen grow back? Baleen does grow really slowly, and my understanding is that it grows throughout their entire lives. I guess it may depend on the extent of the damage, and if the root was damaged, it's kind of like a fingernail, so it does keep growing. So the potential is there for some seriously damaged baleen to recover. Whether it can recover at the rate that it needs to is another question. But I have seen pictures of right whales with pretty temporarily damaged baleen sticking out of their mouths, and they have been able to survive. So I think it depends on the extent of it. Let's see. Where do whales live? For North Atlantic right whales, their primary habitat is along the US East Coast in Atlantic Canada. And we have seen a little bit of a shift of them going north, probably looking for their food supply as the Gulf of Maine warms. So there's been increasing sightings in the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada. We also have increasing sightings actually south of Cape Cod, south of the islands of Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, where there seems to be a patch of plankton for them to be feeding on, and they seem to have established a year-round habitat there. And then we get these wanderers. The New England Aquarium houses the catalog for these animals, and they've identified some individuals who have gone off on these walkabouts, I guess. Mogul's one in particular. And I think the sightings have been Norway, Iceland, and the Azores. And I think it was last summer, if I'm remembering correctly, that actually a sighting off of France. So it's possible for them to make pretty extensive journeys, at least some of the individuals. And there was a population of right whales that was on in the Eastern Atlantic as well. So they were on both sides of the Atlantic before the extensive hunting. So perhaps there is some historical knowledge that remains within the population that allows them to go sort of explore some things like the Azores and the Med off of France as well. Heard that right whales are reproducing much slower. So they are. The calving rate, most recently, is I think about 10 years between calves. That compared to say like are Gulf of Maine humpback whales, which are typically calving every 2 to 3 years. So that's obviously a concern that they're not calving as consistently or frequently as they once did. It's probably a combination of things. And one of the issues is that when there are data to suggest that when they're getting entangled, that uses up a lot of energy, and that makes them less fit, less healthy. And so they may not be able to get pregnant, or if they get pregnant, they may not be able to sustain that pregnancy. They are thinner. Actually, there was a paper, Dr. Peter Corcoran and his colleagues just released a paper recently looking at North Atlantic right whales compared to other right whale species in the southern hemisphere, the South Atlantic right whales. And those guys are much fatter than our North Atlantic right whales. And it might be that they're not getting the nutrition that they need. So if you think of a woman marathoner, she loses a lot of body fat, and she may stop ovulating as a result, because the body fat triggers some hormones that would allow her to ovulate. So it's possible that these guys, or women, right whales in this case, are not getting fat enough to have that hormone trigger to be able to ovulate, to successfully reproduce too. So it might be a variety of stress factors. Noise is another one. Noise can stress them out. And Dr. Roz Rowland and her colleagues had done a paper looking at the impact of ship noise on right whales, and found that it causes stress hormones. And those stress hormones can, just as they can in humans, stress hormones can, they're good for a flight or fight reflex, but long-term, they're really impactful in a negative way on your heart. They can cause your immune system to be suppressed. They can cause some really horrible physical things. And so if they're under this chronic stress, that might not be good for them either. So it's probably a whole bunch of different factors. And that's actually one of the amazing things about the slowing ships down, is it actually makes them quieter too, which is really huge. So that's another benefit to slowing the ships down. Sorry. So I think, how many fishermen are actually using ropeless? How soon do you think it will be ready to make a contribution to their survival? That's a great question, and not soon enough. and I want to be super honest that, ropeless is not ready for prime time right now. It's being worked on, it's being researched, and it's very expensive. There are gear conflict issues to work out, and there are some legal issues to work out for permitting as well. So it's definitely in a testing phase, but it's the most promising solution that I have seen in the literal decades of working to help save right whales. So I hope that we're in a place where we can start to sort of fast track some of this stuff. And I appreciate beyond words the fishermen that are willing to do the testing on this, because this isn't easy. Change isn't easy for any of us. Being stuck in our houses is a big change. Having to wear a mask when we go outside is a big change. And that's hard. Change is really hard. And when your entire business is set up to fish in a very specific way, and you have your budget set for your line of how much money you can make in fishing that way, and then somebody says, hey, you have to spend another $150,000 on new technology that you might be harder for you to use. That's a hard ask. And that's why we think that the Save Right Whales Act is really, really important, to be able to infuse some of that money to have that technology tested to a point with fishermen who can use it. And they're the ones that are going to have to use it. So they have to be part of this testing to be able to use it, and then say that this is a prototype that will work, and then find a way to get it to a place where it is affordable for everybody. And so I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you what the time frame was for that. I don't, but I know that it's only going to take longer if we don't do the testing now. So I'm very, very optimistic that we can get some of these tests done in the next, and some have. The New England Aquarium's done some testing. The International Fund for Animal Welfare has done some testing already, and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the Northeast Fishery Science Center, they're all working together to try and move these tests forward. And we're really hopeful about some potential testing that will happen later this year. So we have to get through the test before we can have it be a reality. And that's where we are at that point. I think that's all the questions I could see anyway. So again, thank you so much. Please go back and check out our other videos. Check out the schedule Sabrina puts up for what's happening next week. I really appreciate your time and appreciate the patience with me. This is my first one, and thanks to everybody who tuned in, and also to everybody who's helping with right whales, because they are magic and we need them. All right, I'm going to try and figure out how to sign out now. Bye.